You're now listening to the Something Good Podcast Network. Please press any key to continue.
A kiss, as defined by Dan Webster, is something pleasing, a caress, a gentle touch. But there's another kiss that isn't in Webster's.
Hey world, we're kids!
Some critics say they don't make music, they just make noise.
Yeah, Kiss sucks!
Kiss implies the extreme in the theatrics on stage, utilizing fire and smoke and bizarre costumes, and the ever-consistent, constant concealment of their true identities.
Speaking of which, Kiss is going to have its own comic book soon.
Take Kiss with you. It's fun. Show your friends and be the first. Now.
Oh my God, no time to turn!
Welcome once again to No Time to Turn, a Kiss nerd podcast.
Nerds.
Not an expert, just nerds.
Just nerds.
We are not experts. We're just a bunch of random schmoes that like to sit around and talk about everybody's favorite group, Kiss.
Yeah, that they love to hate.
Anyway, we are tracking the history of Kiss album by album, year by year, and now we are moving into the rock and roll over era.
That is correct.
We just we finished Destroyer, and I think as we were winding down Destroyer, these things move so fast, you forget about it because we have the hindsight of, at this point, I guess for this era, 45 years. And you forget that this stuff is just coming at a rapid clip. They're pulling stuff out every 6 or 8 months. So in the middle of this Destroyer tour, they've changed, or they've added, I should say, business management with Carl Glickman, who is somehow partnered with Howard Marks, who runs advertising. They've brought along a guy named Chris Lent as the liaison and tour accountant, and he'll be a pivotal figure for the next 10 years.
I'm reading Peter Criss's book right now, and he's getting into the personalities of like Chris Lent and Howard and all those guys too. Yeah, that's been a fun read right now.
But the album Destroyer initially has not done what they had hoped. They really had, pretty high expectations, great expectations,
if you will,
for that. And it doesn't really, it doesn't connect like they were hoping that it would. And then an interesting thing happens. We discussed this, I believe, in the last episode. The flipping of
the A side into Beth,
of Beth to the A side, and suddenly they have a surprise hit on their hands.
They're a household name, winning awards and things like that.
Well,
and
People's choice, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to that. And then for Halloween, they appear on the Paul Lynde Halloween special.
I still love that special, or at least their bit. I love that.
It was, and that was really a major, I think, introduction for a lot of people, particularly of a certain age group, because it's certainly, if you wanted to pinpoint a certain event where their appeal starts to, as they say, widen.
Yes.
And by widening, that means it gets to a lower age group.
Yeah.
It starts to shift to a much younger audience. And this was the moment probably that did it.
Peter says that even in his book. And, for better or worse, that's exactly what happens.
It's
even kind of like working off that, like in the recent history thing, he was calling it all cutesy things. We were starting to do cutesy things.
Well, their image played towards that so much. They were very much, whether Peter was aware of it or not, obviously Gene was bringing a lot of comic book influence into what he did. Apparently, I've dug up a little piece of information I was not previously aware of. Prior to agreeing to do the Paul Lynde special, they were offered an appearance on a Mary Tyler Moore TV special.
Interesting.
Really?
And I don't know the details on that, but from what I read, Bill Aucoin said that part of the reason why they turned it down was they felt that the imagery that they were being asked to present was too dark, which is kind of odd. And that they wanted them to use someone else's material. They didn't want them to sing Kiss songs.
Oh yeah, that would have been the immediate no from me.
And I'm like, I don't, what and I can't, for
That's
the likes of me, try to figure out, like, what were they going to do? Have them sing Alice Cooper songs? What? I don't know.
Yeah, right.
But obviously they turned it down, and I think, it didn't hurt them at all because they wound up with this Paul Lynde thing.
Do you remember all the guests that were on that particular show?
On the Paul Lynde show.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had Margaret Hamilton, who was the original Wicked Witch of the West from Wizard of Oz, and then they had...
see, Betty White was on there, I think.
Was Betty White on it? Roz Kelly, who had been having some successes. Pinky Tuscadero on the TV show Happy Days.
I remember that part.
And Pinky's little sister was played by...
Susie Quattro.
Yep, as...
Leather Tuscadero.
Leather Tuscadero. All right, ding, ding, ding.
Good job, Captain.
Look at the big brain on Cap.
Know. Good job, buddy.
My mom loved Happy Days.
Then find out he's just looking at it right here on his computer.
No, that's still trap memory right there.
Good job.
Was it Billy Barty that did Witchy Poo?
Good question.
I can't recall.
I think Tim Conway was on the episode too.
But it did a lot for him, and it might have been, you could make an argument, I guess, that this would have been the beginning of the end. The Kiss as a it's also the beginning of the beginning in a very real way, but Kiss is that sort of kind of, I don't like to use the word underground, but they were certainly very much, not even a niche thing, but their audience, they had built their audience on the road. They had not had a hit record, including Destroyer was not a hit record. I don't think Destroyer even made the top 100 on its initial release. Now, eventually it would climb back in on the strength of Beth by that fall. But, upon release in March, the previous spring, it really just didn't do that well. It kind of floundered. Now,
and I wonder if part of that was due to like them kind of having a bit of a different sound when compared to the other three.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people that were, Kiss fans at that point were pretty disappointed with it. I mean, it was very left field, I think, at the time. Of course, we're looking again with hindsight, and they've done other things and experiment with other ideas.
And that is interesting / cool that, like, in hindsight, we can look at it and go, like, well, it may not be my favorite Kiss album, but it still sounds like a definitive Kiss album. You hear it and you're just like, oh, yeah, that's pure Kiss. But how the fan base at the time was like, this is not Kiss.
That's not pure Kiss at all with all this extra shit on it.
It's become one of probably their, definitive records.
The Detroit Rock City by itself is one of the definitive Kiss tunes.
Yeah, absolutely. And but they're second guessing themselves here. They're coming out of this and they're trying to figure out, okay, this, and Bob Ezrin thought this was going to be the beginning of a long, fruitful relationship, much like he had with Alice Cooper. Surprise, surprise.
That did not happen.
I think the first person they approached coming out of it was Jack Richardson.
No, it was Jack Douglas.
Jack Douglas.
Yeah, and he did the Aerosmith and Cheap Trick records.
Yeah, I meant to say Jack Douglas.
Okay. And one thing I read that was kind of funny was that Jack was friends with Bob.
Yes.
And Bob had no idea that they talked to Jack.
Yeah, and they found out through back channels, and it was like, that was a blunder.
Yeah, and even both Paul and Gene have admitted since then, being like, that was the wrong way to go about that.
Whoopsies.
They didn't do it right, but they ended up zeroing in on Eddie Cramer. Who, of course, they had been quite successful with the Alive album. He produced or engineered
the first demos.
Yeah, he produced the first demos, and he engineered a lot of the stuff that they were being, I guess, probably influenced, or at least were trying to measure up to, which, of course, is like Led Zeppelin, The Who, what have you, Jimi Hendrix.
And didn't Ezrin also, not Ezrin, didn't he also come back to do Ace's record?
That would be later, yeah.
Yeah. I think I've always preferred Eddie Kramer's producing style. Anytime it's an Eddie Kramer produced Kiss record, I really like the guitar tones. I really like just the overall vibe that he captures from Kiss.
I certainly think they come out with something really good on this record. But it's interesting because this whole cycle from this point to Love Gun is almost sort of overlooked and kind of forgotten chapter in Kiss. But there's a lot of really important stuff that happens in this that needs to be noted. But let's kind of start where, again, they come off the road from Destroyer, and they're getting ready to go record. They've chosen Eddie Cramer. They've retained Corky Stasiak, who was the engineer for Destroyer. He makes an interesting comment that he was surprised that they changed from Ezrin to Cramer. And this is the quote I found and I thought was very telling. He said they were better than they thought they were. And I thought that's a really interesting thing to say. They were better than they thought they were.
Yeah.
Which is that's not they're better than their audience thought they were. That's not they're better than what you thought they were. They were better than what they thought they were. That's a unique producer
or engineer comment.
And he's not paid to say that. He's saying this in hindsight. So he's kind of acknowledging what a lot, that I don't know how he would say this. He's acknowledging that they were a lot stronger than their critics even gave them credit for. And
maybe just kind of putting a little bit more faith in themselves and kind of boosting up the songwriting probably could have shown more talent kind of comment.
Well, they had the ability to do more, and that came apparent under Ezrin's direction.
Yeah.
And here they're not going to have that. Yeah, they're going to have a producer who's going to be less interested in
arrangements
like
and
stuff. Now, the other thing to also consider is that Ezrin winds up with a lot of songwriting credits.
Yeah.
Which means a lot of publishing royalties.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not necessarily something they're probably very interested in sharing. But then again,
they call that points too.
It would make that it would have made more sense had the record been a blockbuster. Because to have given him a percentage of 10 million records as opposed to a percentage of 1 million records, which the album eventually did sell 1 million records, but it took a long time to get there.
Yeah.
So people, I think, forget that Destroyer did not come charging out of the gate going, "Here is Kiss," and everyone, "Oh, finally, here we are."
Yeah.
No, they kind of crept over the finish line mere weeks before the release of Rock and Roll Over. Beth is only just beginning to chart in that time frame.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, the Destroyer tour got cut early, was it? Because the stage show was pretty crazy, or they kept having to take out things from the live show because it was failing,
it wasn't
or what?
Cut early. They just, I think it just became kind of it was a big stage.
Right.
It was their biggest production yet, but we'll get to that here in a minute because that plays into some of what happens here, because they're going to continue to use this stage in the Rock and Roll Over cycle. They're using the same costumes, same staging. But before we get there, let's talk about the album itself, because they've recorded this in the very early fall of 76. I've got the dates, September 30th through October 16th.
Yeah.
That's according to Corky Stasiak's notes. And
over at the, how do you say that? The Nanuet Star Theater?
Yeah, I think it's Nanuet, New York, which is not. It's about 30 minutes, I think, away from New York City. So it would have been an easy drive from at any point wherever they might be residing at that point, which I don't know. But
and again, they're with Eddie Cramer, who knows how to work in a live setting like that. It's like we talk about Bob Ezrin being an arrangement songwriter producer, where Eddie Cramer, would you say he's like more of an engineer / producer kind of?
I'd say he's more of a performance guy.
Performance, yeah, probably that too.
Well, I think also it's just getting the good sounds and stuff. Ace felt a lot more comfortable with him because they seemed to have a good chemistry and work together to, well, let's try this amp, let's try that, let's play this guitar through that amp, and let's play that guitar through, that kind of stuff.
The stuff I would eat up.
Yeah, it's stuff that people don't generally think about because you just immediately assume that it's exactly as you see live. It's, Ace playing a Les Paul through a Marshall.
No,
it's probably Ace, and in some cases he might be playing a Telecaster through a Super Twin.
Yeah, exactly.
So that first Led Zeppelin album was made on a Supro and a Telecaster and a fuzz.
Yeah. And so what's interesting, they've moved the drums again in this. They did this with Destroyer. We talked about this. They would set up the drums in different parts of the studio to achieve different things. I don't understand this concept very well because it seems like that would be inconsistent. But apparently, the more famous or the more common story is they talk about setting up the drums in the bathrooms and using a video link.
Yeah,
which is unusual.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's mentioned a lot in Peter's book too.
See, that one just seems so hard to believe. I heard the one where they put them like in an empty hall to try to get that really big Bonham sound.
What they did is apparently this theater was a theater in the rounds, which meant it had 360 seating and the stage was in the center. And from what I've read, the way I understand it is most of the guitar parts are recorded with the amplifiers pointed outward into the hallways, into the, like, I guess the entrance hallways to the theater, and mic'd probably at different intervals.
That's cool, actually.
And this works for me. I think it makes sense to me because I've always thought this album had a really great ambient sound, which I think, in my personal opinion, it's their best sounding record.
I'd agree with you on that.
And there's because there is a murkiness to Destroyer, and I don't know quite how to define that or how to state that in a way that probably makes sense other than to say
it's kind of fuzzy.
It's
like almost like warm coat fuzzy kind of thing. It doesn't have a certain bite to it. Everything just kind of has a
it's kind of it's it's very atmospheric, and I think it works for that album. It's not a criticism.
No, not at all.
I don't mean murky as in muddy.
That's hotter than hell.
Yeah, but this album I think has a very in-your-face direct sound. It's very upfront. It's very forward. The guitars sound more powerful than they have on any of their previous albums, save for Alive.
Yep.
They sound like more close. It sounds closer to this guitar sound of the live album of Alive than it does any other album.
There's hardly any bells and whistles on this album, really.
Well, I mean, at least that's readily apparent. It's very, 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 down to the bone.
Mm-hmm.
They also set up the drums on the center stage. There's a story that Corky Stasiak relates in one of the books where they've spent 2 days setting up and miking the drums, getting a very, because they wanted a bigger, thunderous sound, using the whole ambient tone of the theater. And then Sean Delaney shows up with a skateboard.
Yeah.
I remember this now.
And somewhere someone thinks it would be a good idea to see if you can skate down the aisles. And in the process, he ends up skating straight into this drum kit that they've spent days setting up. And it's like an hour away from everyone showing up to record.
Oh, no.
If you're Eddie Cramer, do you just like throw your hands up and you're just like...
Well, no, he's not there. It's just...
Sean
Delaney and Corky Stasiak.
Just fucking around.
has broken his fingers. So with one hand, they're sitting around furiously trying to reset everything.
Oh my God.
And then everyone shows up and they're just like... And they just do some, some mic checks or whatever else. And Quirky says Paul Stanley turns and looks at him and goes, I think this sounds better even today than it did yesterday. And he swears he never told anyone that story. And it's the first time it ever got relayed was in that book.
Wow.
It's a funny story.
I do love that, especially because I've also been in those shoes of like being in the studio and like people are moving a little bit too fast in the tracking room. And I'm like, you need to watch these microphones. If we touch one of these, we're probably going to have to redo everything.
So do y'all want to go through this album? We go song by song?
Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead and do that.
Because
it's a lot to chew on with these songs.
There's some Stone classics on this.
Absolutely.
And your favorite bit of trivia. Actually, I will always remember, you were always, before I really dug into the internet, you were the treasure trove of like the fun Kiss trivia. And do you remember you told me about this record that a lot more people have brought up, but might as well too while we're here. The fact that everything has a fade out.
Oh yeah, there's no hard endings. There's people that I've argued with this about. It's like, oh, the songs fade out, or all the songs are mostly just chorus repeated, and I'm like, and your problem is I don't understand this complaint. Like,
I understand if it's a fucking what's the guy's name that writes all the fucking Bon Jovi songs in the 80s and the Alice Cooper shit? The Desmond Child choruses that repeat 8 times or whatever.
They haven't got.
It isn't that bad.
They haven't met Desmond Child at this point that I'm aware of, but. Yeah, I guess you could say it's a valid complaint, but it doesn't bother me. And I think part of this is because there is the timeline issue that this is the first Kiss album that I ever got. I didn't get it. My brother got it, but by default it was actually we might have had Hotter Than Hell before that. But, this is a dim memory. But,
this one definitely grabbed you harder.
And in the interest of full disclosure, this is my personal favorite Kiss album.
Okay.
So
I'd say probably in my top 5.
I have a very strong emotional connection to this because it's just, and I don't think it's my favorite because it's my first. Because I've gone through different phases where certain ones are my favorite, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But this one is consistently, I came to realize, if you had to pick one, this would be the one for me.
Yeah.
I think
this would be my Desert Island Kiss disc.
Sonically, for me, I think this hits everything that it needs. Songwriting too. There's a lot of great fucking songs on here too. There's a lot more jams than songs, I guess, too. But it's also that point where everybody's kind of splintering in their own little camps as far as songwriting too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they never really wrote together per se. There's a very small, I think less than 5 songs that are credited to Simmons and Stanley together.
Yeah, a lot of them are just either Simmons with someone else, Stanley with someone else,
Stanley with Delaney.
Yeah. Sean Delaney, again, he's got his presence on this record. There's a big thumbprint there that isn't acknowledged, not as strongly as it should be. Let's start. Let's go song by song here. Opens with "I Want You,"
starting with a 12-string acoustic,
which is I think it's kind of throws a little bit of a swerve right out of the front, but.
Immediately flips the script on you.
Yeah. But you can almost feel it coming. But it has almost that kind of, I don't know, it feels kind of very 70s kind of AM kind of a sound, and that just
especially with that intro.
That's what I mean. That intro part just has kind of is like, okay, where are we going here? Because it's almost like they're acknowledging that they just made this album that a lot of people didn't understand. And they're kind of like
poking fun at it.
Yeah, we're going to go there again. No, we're not.
I can totally see that.
Here's my yacht rock intro, then Marshall guitars.
And I'll say this is one of the few Kiss songs that doesn't get better or worse when played live. It's a great song when they play it live. Like the Alive 2 version, I love that. Now, sure, that is mostly studio, but we've also seen the Tokyo Dome or the Japan Rock and Roll Over show.
Yeah.
And they play I Want You on that one. And that's still just it's so good.
I love both the guitar solos that are on it, too. Paul's part's really good.
Oh, and coming from a guitarist standpoint, I am just a sucker for any of those da-da-da-da-da-dum-bum. Just those little quick little walks Ace will do or Paul will do.
That's one, I think that's one of the things they do well. They're not super flash players, and that's, I think, nor should they be. But one thing that strikes me about this song, the recorded version, not so much the live version, is it's very funky.
Oh yeah, especially on the bass.
Yeah,
and that little dropout that you're talking about, that dun 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 dun.
We've talked about this on previous episodes. How there always seems to be this kind of unacknowledged but very pervasive R&B influence on a lot of what they do, particularly Paul's stuff.
And it's odd with Paul because Peter was the jazz R&B guy.
Well, but Paul's he's a great stylist. I'll say that as the best as I can, rather than a great copier. But he's really good at copying stuff. He's a great stylist, and I think it gets overlooked because it's muscled up so heavily, and they hit so hard with it that you almost miss it. But that funk feel is very much there. And I think there's a lot of that on this album that just but it's layered under the sheen of heavy guitar. And that kind of gives it its own uniqueness. You mentioned there's the dual lead on this. A lot of people I think aren't aware that it's a split lead. The first part is
Paul leads over to Ace,
and then it flips to Ace, and they'll do this again on
I Stole Your Love.
But that's getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
Just a little preview. That's my emotionally favorite Kiss album.
Those are both like super melodic. The way they just kind of like lead into each other too.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely.
And it's just done so well that you can almost miss it.
But Paul and Ace do have pretty good distinct guitar tones, and for the longest time I was always like the Ace fan of loving his tone. Using maybe like that song as a reference point, I really like Paul's fuzz guitar. Like it just hits just right. I love it.
Well, on this album, I think they've really caught the guitar sound on this
Absolutely.
song in a way that none of the albums have previous. And then, of course, towards the end of the song where it reverts back to the acoustic part, but when it launches back in, they have the flange across it.
Oh yeah,
that's man.
And then
the screaming guitar solos at the end and everything else.
Yeah.
It's like the guitars are matching Paul's. I want you. Yeah. Excellent songwriting. Excellent song.
Very, very killer song.
It's one of my. I was going to say I don't know if it's my favorite opener, but it's definitely up there in the top 5 for sure for Kiss records.
It works. It's really
very
strong.
powerful.
Then it goes into the song "Take Me."
Mm-hmm.
This is
It's kind of like a Zeppelin-y riff. Dun, 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 dun,
yeah,
dun,
I mean,
dun.
there's I guess there's some Sean Delaney, I think at one point claimed to have written this front to back, but I mean, he said, she said, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
That wouldn't surprise me if he had put the lion's share of the work into this.
Especially with the lyric content.
Oh yeah.
Well, I say that only because, again, it has kind of a funk feel.
And you know what I think also adds to that? And this another reason I think Sean had a pretty heavy hand in it. Correct me if I'm wrong, around this time is when Casablanca was also doing a lot of the disco stuff and kind of like Donna Summer and things like that, correct? This song has double hi-hat.
Yeah,
Peter's
yeah.
And it almost kind of mimics like a tambourine kind of sound.
Right.
And so that even leads me to believe that with Sean being so heavy into the disco scene.
Yeah, but did he introduce that? I mean, that would have been more of a production idea. I'm not sure that.
Yeah, you're right.
It could have been Peter's inventiveness.
But
I'd
rather
rather give credit to Peter for the inventiveness because he never gets any credit for his inventiveness, and there's some cool stuff going on there.
Oh yeah, well then right here on No Time to Turn, Peter did that. No, I am just a big sucker for that double hi-hat thing. I love that sound.
I do too. I love this whole song. I just think it's a killer riff.
Live when Gene does it, take me.
Yeah, well,
No, or that, or like who does like the high parts on that? Where it's like take me. That's what it sounds like live.
but that's a really great song. The lyrics are kind of dopey, but
What's the first line? Grab your hand on my rocket.
Put your hand in my pocket. Grab onto my rocket.
Yeah.
Feels so good to see you, Lucille. Lucille?
Babe, I gotta
That's
know. Do you want to go?
That has got to be a Sean Delaney lyric.
I know.
I don't see Paul like, okay, what's her name going to be? Lucille. You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille. Anyway. But I really like the lead on this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It kind of has, towards the end, it kind of has this sort of almost like kind of pauses in it,
Yeah, Peter does a little pause and Gene boom boom on the bass.
There's a lot of interesting little kind of arrangement
All that
flourishes in there that are really cool.
all that funk you were talking about.
Yeah, Gene is great on kind of implementing those little funk bass lines too.
And those little stops that Peter does too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Then of course it goes right into probably the album's most well-known track, "Calling Dr. Love."
God.
This song still messes with me a little bit from a production aspect because when the drums kick in, as soon as they go back to what's the opening chord? A.
It's like an E. It's like E.
Okay. When they go back to that opening chord after the drums, dun 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 dun. There on that hit, there's a tape wobble where they clearly punched Peter back in, and it's very odd. It messes with me every time.
Well, I don't know that I've noticed that. I noticed there seems to be a wobble. A lot of people seem to think it's out of time. You know, they're doing the same thing again while they're recording this with Peter. They started it with Bob Ezrin, and it continued with Eddie Cramer, where Eddie Cramer stood with a box and
with a microphone in it
and tapped the time. Because
there was a
Peter
metronome.
was having, that was their metronome, and
But Peter plays from the heart, man.
yeah, but I mean,
the heart needs to play in time.
yeah, but it still fits. I mean, would you know, if we listen to it any other way? I mean, it's just other guys playing it, the other guys playing it, coming in. It doesn't have that same feel.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
You know, what
I
I
love
think
the song,
is,
though.
I've always thought this was the silliest song. I don't know
course it
why,
is.
even when I was a kid. But you know, there's something about that. It sounds, again, that's a very '70s thing. You know, like I can see some, like, you know, some dude with a polyester, you know, suit with the big butterfly collar, with the, opened up to his chest with a gold chain, going, "Call me Dr. Love."
Baby.
It's just corny. But when, you know, and we know, of course, now you got the demos that are out there. This began life as a song called "Bad Bad Lovin'," which was as equally as bad as this. But you know, it's cool. It doesn't matter. You know, it's like somehow the way he, the delivery of it. I mean, some of the way he's delivering the vocal, you know.
In the end, you let me.
Yeah, but he's saying something.
Duo.
Yeah, what is it? What the hell is that?
Yeah,
you know?
I know.
We never understood that. Even when we were kids, we were like, "What's he even saying there?"
You know what? I wonder if that's like a Gene-ism, because he kind of sounds like that when he says "double roll" in the movie.
I don't know. I don't know.
Or the,
but what I think is cool is when you get to the solo, and he starts going up on the high part of the neck. You know,
it's mostly bends the whole
he's
time.
doing these high bends. If you listen, they ramp up the reverb on that, so it sounds like it's going way up in the sky.
I've always
you know,
loved that.
and then when it drops back down, the reverb drops back down.
Yep.
You know, and it's
that's an awesome little trick.
It's little things like that just make it. You know,
That's such an Eddie Cramer move too.
yeah, and it's. I don't know.
And he name drops the band's fucking name in this song, like subtly.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It's like the first step of the Cure is
a kiss.
A kiss.
Of cherry flavor.
And then
I thought of that too.
and then when it comes back out of the solo into the chorus, Peter just is driving on his crash.
You don't hear that a lot in songs anymore these days.
And you know, it just gives the song a big drive, and then of course, you know, it
Fades out.
And something I was thinking about, literally just now, it popped in my head. I wonder if the "Calling Dr. Love" was a leftover from "Gotta Thunder." Rock and roll.
Oh, who knows?
Because that demo, they pulled that kind of like falsetto, kind of like background thing, and it immediately made me think of "Calling Dr. Love."
It's like, I want to keep that falsetto on something, guys.
Well, no. I mean, that's sort of a Gene-ism too. You see that in other songs that he does, particularly later.
Oh, "See You in Your Dreams" too.
Ladies' Room.
I like it live. I don't think studio it works.
I'm losing my brain here. What did that start life as? It was there's a demo.
Oh geez, I don't know. I don't think I ever ran across that demo.
don't
Or either
know
I
that
did
either.
didn't fully connect it or pay attention.
It kind of plods a little bit on the studio version, though. Like it sounds good live.
I've always liked it. I you know, it's almost like it's a little bit. You know, it has a Chuck Berry feel to me. So, you know, and
I can hear that now.
You know, I think some of the lyrics are pretty cool. You're just a jewel in the rough.
Yeah.
You want to show me your stuff.
You want to show me your stuff.
For my money, you can't be too soon.
Again,
I'll meet you in the ladies' room. You know, we used to think, you know, when you're a little kid and you're hearing that stuff, you're just like, ooh, what, you know, and then you're like, what are they going to do in there? You know,
talk about Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, the danger element.
But the cowbell, Yeah, that's a weird break in the every chorus. It's a little odd.
Yeah, because there's no tambourines or shakers or anything like that. You got to break it up with something. I always like the cowbell though, especially on Kiss songs.
Yeah, I definitely like. I think it's a good and well written song, especially the chorus. I like the chorus; it's catchy as hell. But I like the Alive version. I just think it's got that. It's a little faster and it's kind of get a little bit more excitement to it. And they don't do the. I'm not a fan of the way they end it when Peter goes into the halftime. The do do da do do da do do da. To me, it just loses all bit of little bit of excitement it actually had.
Yeah, and Gene plays rhythm guitar on this track too. It's the only. Like the other weird album note that I have for this entire record is that Gene plays rhythm guitar on this one song, and that's it.
Well, I like Ace's lead on it. It's very simple.
Yeah.
But it's very effective. I mean, it's very melodic.
A good Ace solo is one you can sing back.
Like I just did.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, well, and that's pretty much all Ace solos.
Yeah.
That's, that's something that
especially
he never
these
really
first 5 or 6 records.
Ace wasn't a flash player like what would become popular in the 80s, but then again, can you sing along with fucking Eddie Van Halen solos?
No.
See, I just did.
And a nod to my friend Daniel Woodson. I'll say it again. I said it once, I'll say it again. Fuck Van Halen.
Yeah, my man.
I know. I want to get you, Alex, and Eddie on to do a Fuck Van Halen episode and have me just try to defend everything you throw at me because I'm a Van Halen fan.
I don't hate Van Halen. It's just I'm just tired of their fucking hero worship. They're not that great. And anyway, but I gotta after I mentioned that in the other episode or 2 ago, whatever it was, that a friend of mine messaged me, and that's all he wrote. He was like, "Tell us how you really feel, man."
It's like what? Fuck Van Halen? Fuck you.
So here we go to Baby Driver.
My least favorite.
And a lot of people say that.
And I don't hate. We did a whole episode on You Gotta Hear This, which you can hear in our archives on the network, about Baby Driver. And
archives where? Tell the people
on the Something Good Network. On the Something Good Network Patreon.
And what's the show called?
You Gotta Hear This.
Okay.
Yes.
www.
Did you just say that and I miss it?
Yeah, you did.
Oh.
Patreon.com/Something Good Network.
Yeah, well, hey, gotta put your stuff over, man.
But yeah, he and I went back and forth on Baby Driver to where I don't hate the song. I think it's weird, and Alex made some good points about how there's some moments where their stuff definitely got punched in or rearranged.
Yeah, that's another
and things
one.
Like that
the
too.
Intro, as soon as it goes to the bop bop, go Baby Driver, that bop bop sounds to me like another punch in. Like the build up into that feels very off time.
Yeah, it does feel a little weird. It is. What is the song even about? Who knows? I don't really care. I like Peter's vocal.
I do too.
Because he gets it, especially when he does his screaming stuff,
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I really like about this. I'm giving this a lot of thought because I'm stupid and I'm a nerd. The descending guitar lines on it. Ba, 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 ba,
I like those a lot too.
Those are horn lines.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
We've talked about them doing this before. I don't think it's ever been more obvious than in that moment. I can hear again. This is an R&B song. It's just muscled up and swaggered out with hard rock machismo. But really, this could have been just as easily a driving more funkadelic than Earth, Wind and Fire, but it's still
but it's just a stripped down rock and roll version. And I found a line in Peter's book where he talks about this song that I thought was interesting. He claims that Gene and Paul messed with the arrangement on Baby Driver and post.
It's very likely. It's hard to say.
This was co-written with his main songwriting partner, Stan Penridge.
Yeah. Well, co-written.
Yeah.
Who knows? But
I think looking at it from a guitarist standpoint, I think what bugs me about the song is the main riff is just da 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 da.
I like that. That's what I like.
Over and over.
And I like that, and I like that it's kind of got almost a call and response with the guitar. It's the he sings the verse and it's met with the guitar.
Yeah.
It matches it, and I just think this is an underrated song. Honestly, I think this is just it's a solid driving, I like that drive bomb. There's
a little hard
something
rocker.
about that. It's got, but and I like the horn sounding guitars. That chorus, those guitars just rain in over everything at the end, and I'm like, this is just a really killer song. If you really give it a fair shake, you realize, man, there's a lot going on here, and this isn't the underrated song that people want to dismiss because. There's a lot of fire and fury in this.
Yeah. And I can totally, I think looking at it from that angle, I can probably appreciate it a little bit more. It just, actually from what you were saying earlier, this is your favorite record for so many solid bangers. I think that's why it kind of stuck out to me, because everything else was so like between 8 out of 10 to 10 out of 10 that this one hitting like maybe a 5 out of 10 was like, ooh, what happened?
Well, see, I wouldn't rate it that low, but that's just me.
When that movie Baby Driver came out, what was it, 5-6 years ago? That's all I sang in my head for a few days.
You flip the album over, slip the needle in the groove, you get a very awkward intro to the song Love 'Em and Leave 'Em. And it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And it seems like they were trying to like stretch for space here. There's not a lot of song here. If there's any valid criticism for the endless chorus and the fade out, you also got an endless intro here. But having said all that, I love this song.
Oh, yeah.
And I really love, this is one of my all-time favorite Gene vocals, just for that opening line where he goes, "You see me coming your way, hey, hey, hey."
Sitting by
But just that, hey, 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 hey.
Yeah.
That right there in and of itself. And I'm just like, every time I hear that, I'm like, yeah, I love that.
No, I really do love this song. To me, this is one that probably doesn't get as much love as it should, even though it was part of, which we can talk about after the fact, it was part of those 3 videos they kind of shot.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because, I mean, what was their... It seems like they had an intention for this to be a single. It would be an odd choice for me to be a single. It's got that weird... That solo is a little bit weird sounding. It's processed in some way that I haven't quite figured out what they're doing.
Yeah, it's not quite a reverse.
Yeah.
Like when he's doing that...
But I think that's what they did. I think they reversed it.
That's what
I've read somewhere that's what the trick was on that.
Okay.
Because that's another Eddie Kramer trope, that he would play a lot of shit backwards since like his Jimi Hendrix days.
Yeah, and so it just has that weird sound to it, and I don't know, but I love it. I think it sounds cool, and I like the, I just like the whole thing. I don't mind that it extends. I'm like, don't bore us, get to the chorus kind of idea. And the song is pretty much all chorus, and it's like
basically,
and it's like, gee, what's this song about? Oh, I think it's readily apparent.
And again, those R&B moments where it's like da 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 da.
Yeah.
And my favorite moments in the song are like when he says when you ask me which hotel I'm staying, the way the guitars kind of ring out the drum fill, and then the plucking of the accent notes from like Paul or something into the
no, this is the lyrics come from that Rock and Rolls Royce.
Yes.
Yeah. Which, I could see that have been a workable song too.
Yeah. It was probably the most fleshed out of all those, it felt like.
Now let's go into what I would say is probably the single best Kiss song of all time.
Really?
Yeah, I think there's few moments that shine as brightly as this. They hit all the best stuff that they know how to do.
It's definitely one of my favorites.
It's got, and we're talking about Mr. Speed, of course.
Yes.
Mr. Speed is, if I were to go, okay, what's the all-time greatest Kiss song? I usually would go to that.
Yeah.
And just that riff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's got that kind of a blues bend riff. They've never played this live, and from what I understand from friends, it's not that easy to play. Or not easy to play and sing necessarily.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the "Can't You Hear Me Knockin'" riff from the Rolling Stones.
Oh yeah. I never thought of that, but but it bends a lot more.
Yeah, exactly.
But it doesn't sound slinky, and it doesn't sound,
too loose.
Too loose. It's still got power behind it.
Great Paul vocal.
Especially,
I love his
yeah, he's got the sass vocal going, and he's got a little bit of a bite to his voice. He's not singing. And to me, that's what Paul did best. That's one of the great differences between 70s Paul and Paul thereafter, when he started trying to be like, I don't fucking know.
Oversing.
Yeah, when he tried to be some great singer. But what made him a great singer was, again, that sass, that grit, it's soulful. It's attitude. And, then on top of it, you get to those little breaks where they do Beatle harmonies.
Yes.
And if there's one thing that Kiss does really fucking well is ape the Beatles.
Yes.
And, Gene more so than Paul, which we'll discuss in future episodes. We'll get into that at length at another point. But, that Beatle harmony has always been their secret weapon.
Yeah.
Their ability to do that. So few groups had that.
Nobody wants to.
And the way they put it in there, I mean, I don't see why this wasn't a single. I don't understand why this isn't like more widely known.
You could totally hear this on like just regular classic rock radio after fucking Leonard Skinner or some shit.
It's just a good, like, take the name Kiss out of it. It's just a solid 70s rock and roll song.
Never take the 70s out of it.
Well, it feels very of the time, though.
I think it's just a great rock and roll song, and it spills over itself and is one of the most underrated and underappreciated songs in their catalog. Maybe not so much. I can remember many, many years ago on probably, it might have been the Kiss Asylum website. I don't remember. There was a poll of everyone's favorite Kiss song, and Mr. Speed won.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I am not alone.
I'm validated.
And I still think that, with like hardcore Kiss nerds, that Mr. Speed is the Stone Jam. I mean, I love this song. I like the lead in it.
Yeah.
Not that many notes in the solo or anything like that either. It's just like a lot of bends, just like Dr. Love.
Well, and then it's got that little shuffle in it, the da 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 da, and then it all just kind of stops, and then he falls right back into the riff again. And I'm like, that arrangement is fucking clever.
And then they change up the riff once they get back into it. We totally like use that as a blueprint for a song we were doing, because I love that kind of arrangement where it's like it kind of comes out and then you modify the riff a little bit and then you bust it right back on in.
And what's interesting is they do this again in the song after, which leads us into "See You in Your Dreams," another favorite of mine from when I was very young.
It's become like a new favorite of mine here in the last few months.
It's a really well written little song. I think a lot of people have overlook it. Of course, we'll revisit this again on Gene's solo album because he kind of extends it and rearranges it a bit. But this version,
he claims that Paul rearranged it and he wasn't happy with that version, and that's why he went and redid it on his record.
That may be true. He might not have been happy. I don't understand why though, because this turns out really strong. It's got a very strong pop underhook,
especially on that chorus.
This isn't, but then you go to that, and that's almost an R&B kind of vocal, or almost of a Temptations kind of a thing. Now it's angular. It isn't like the Temptations at all, but I can hear it flipped a little bit, and it has sort of a Motown kind of a vibe. But then you go into that on the outro part while they're doing that. The riff has that da, 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 da. They bring that in, and it's only on the outro part that shows up. Now let me ask you a question though about this, and I might have asked you before this too, Alex, a long time ago, because I think I'm the only one that hears this.
Okay.
But I hear it because my brother heard it apparently, and I don't know if it's one of those little sonic anomalies that's just creating an aural illusion,
right?
Which it very likely is, or if it's actually there.
Okay.
But on the chorus, I'm hearing a recorder or a flute.
I'll have to go back and listen to that.
Yeah, I got to do that too.
And my brother pointed that out when I was very little because I loved this song, and he thought it was sissy because it had the flute. And I've brought this up. I'm like, y'all don't hear that? It's very subtle. You barely hear it, but it's just going. and under see you.
Okay. I'll have to go back and listen.
And now I'm going, I think that isn't actually there, but if you can hear it,
I was going to say,
you can't unhear it.
Oh yeah. And the thing I also like about this song
but
is
my
like,
brother used to chase me around pretending to play a flute, and I'd go, stop! We were
like the stupid band Kiss and the stupid flutes.
I was like 6 years old, and he would just come up and just tease me with it. And
yeah.
Cut it out. They're not doing that.
You get a little older, they might be doing that.
Maybe it might be there.
But I like the when they come out of the solo and the drums go into the little bit of a breakdown and the call and response between Gene and Paul. See you.
Oh yeah.
Because he adds that extra dreams tonight. That's when they start adding that part into the lyric
and
too.
That's where that leads into the ba da da da. Yeah, it's just a clever arrangement on a very otherwise simple song.
Absolutely.
But it's a great song. It's a fun song.
I love it.
Now, Hard Luck Woman.
I love this song.
There's the narrative on this, the official Kiss narrative on this, that Paul wrote this
for Rod Stewart. Yeah.
And I'm going to call bullshit on that.
Okay.
Because Paul is a great stylist.
There it is.
Yep.
I think he wrote that to be in the style with Rod
with
Stewart.
the intention
he
to
wrote
pitch it to
for them. And I almost would be, because he's so heavily on the fuck Peter bus that I don't think they want to acknowledge that song was probably even written with Peter's voice in mind.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing that he had that same sandpaper kind of quality. This song could not have been sung by anyone other than Peter if you wanted to get that effect. If you're trying to achieve that Rod Stewart faces thing, which is obviously what they were going for.
I was hearing Maggie May throughout it too.
Yeah, well, that's, so I can't see that ever not being the end objective on this.
Right.
So after that, you could say, well, if Paul sang it, would it have even been the same song?
Not really, because we actually got a clip of that in the MTV Unplugged. In recent years, when they've released like the Kissologies and like bootlegs going around, we all know that they were played for like 3 damn hours for that MTV Unplugged, and they saved like 40 minutes of it. And they did that during a changeover. Okay. Paul sang "Hard Luck Woman," and it didn't quite hit. Like, Paul has a great voice. I still say Unplugged is one of the best, Paul's best 80s to 90s vocal performances.
But again,
it just didn't hit.
But it doesn't hit because it doesn't hit, or it doesn't hit because we're so used to having the version that we know that raspy Peter, Because
I think that's just what the song calls for.
I like the song a lot, but it feels like to me a very convoluted, conscious, we're trying to sound like the Faces or Rod Stewart solo or whatever.
Yeah.
And to me, so that kind of almost wrecks the song for me.
Really? It's one of my favorites.
And I like the song. I think it's really well done. I mean, again, Paul has that ability to write in a style and emulate it. I just think it would have been more fully realized had he sang it himself and not gone. And this may not have been Paul's decision. This could have been Eddie Cramer's decision. He might have heard it and gone, this would sound a lot like, Rod Stewart if you had Peter sing it. And then that might be a potential hit. And of course, when you say that, I'm sure all the stars are like, oh yeah. So who knows? I don't know. There might, that may well be the case, but
I know
because another song that was used for the videos.
I know we.
it was definitely released as a single, and it did well.
I know we can only take the memoirs with a grain of salt, but according to Peter's book, he says that he heard Paul do the song, and he says, "Oh fuck that! I should sing this song," in so many words.
Well, that may be true too, and it may be after the fact that once he started doing it, they heard the that it sounded like the Faces or whatever.
Yeah,
but
I also don't believe that they basically had to sit here and like sing it for him and then do it back, because they claim that one like they do Beth, that they had to like do a track for him to sing over.
Oh, I don't know. I just it just feels like a convoluted kind of obviousness to it that the other songs don't necessarily have. I mean, again, we talk about the underpinning of like R&B influence that isn't so readily noticeable because they are so, rocked out, the Beatle harmonies, all these obvious influences that just sort of kind of get worked in, as opposed to just copying, they're working it.
Yeah.
This feels like they're just copying.
Yeah, I can definitely see
like
that.
Like you were saying, it was a stylist kind of arrangement.
It's
an interesting
not
take.
that I don't like the song. It's not that I don't like anything about it. But I'm just saying it's kind of the weakest track. And that's of no one's fault other than the songwriters, probably.
Right.
If that was what they were trying to achieve. I think Peters does a great vocal. I mean, I like Peters' vocals. I mean, everyone does, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
especially live, he's just a beast.
yeah. So, but I just think for the fact that it feels like they're so obviously grabbing towards a particular thing, that's that's the handicap on it. Making Love.
The album's closer.
Yeah, interesting note on this one. The only song played in standard E.
I think Mr. Speed was too.
Was it?
Was it?
I thought that was a half step.
See, y'all are the musicians.
I'm pretty sure Mr. Speed was too.
Okay.
Making Love definitely is too.
Yeah.
Making Love, I think, is a killer riff. This is a killer song all the way through. I like the way they bounce the chorus vocal.
Yeah.
Everything. Well, I'm just the making love.
Oh, yeah.
Making love. It's like it's falling over.
It also does a reverse thing because it goes
Yeah,
like that.
There's a lot of that. Ace's lead on it is great.
Oh yeah.
Do you think those drum hits at the end are like stacked, takes on top of each other because they sound bigger as they get towards the end?
Yeah, he's probably double tracked them. That
I kind of like that.
All these little things, and it just, the song's just got that kind of.
It is very repetitive. It basically stays on the entire time.
Why would it not? Because it's such a gnarly little riff, know, and it's just such a great song. And
when they play it live, it's always fun to watch because Paul's got that flying V with a capo on the first fret, and it looks kind of awkward.
Yeah, but what are you gonna do?
And the live version, always doing the making love, whoa, yeah.
How was that again? Do it again.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Reverse it. Reverse it.
Eddie Cramer, the shit.
Yeah.
So that kind of winds up all the tracks on the album. They recorded this again in the fall of '76, and just as this record is coming out, Beth is peaking out. I think it reached as high as number 7. And now, they've got 2 albums. They're almost competing with themselves at this point.
I wonder if that's part of the reason it does kind of get forgotten, that by the time people really started picking up Destroyer and Rock and Roll Over was out, people weren't really looking at it because they were picking up Destroyer because they had Detroit Rock City and Beth.
Yeah, I don't know. I like... They get this album out. I like the cover art.
Yes. Quick side note. There's an awesome podcast. I'll wind up putting it in the episode description, where the artist discusses going through the making of the artwork and how they even had to do specific cell shading in order to get it right, and how he would show up to printing plants and be like, "Show me your tests." And one time he had to stop and be like, "This is not correct. You did
they
not
had already
separate
printed
it out."
like a bunch of it, right? And they had to just trash it all.
Every little bit.
I remember hearing that.
And like I said, I'll put that episode in the description here. I highly recommend people check it out. I was enamored with hearing about how just specific blues they picked and why they had to go and chest the printing press to make sure it was going to come out that vibrant and stuff like that.
There's no hard copy for this art. There's no real art for this. It was all done through a printer separation, and I don't understand the logistics of that.
I do a little bit, and that's why I said I don't even want to accidentally mess it up. Just take a look in the episode description here, guys, and if you're interested in art and the process of how to get that kind of stuff done, highly recommend it.
But I'll tell you, it's interesting to note there is a particular pressing of it exclusive to the RCA Music Club. Back in the day, you would get an ad in your local paper on Sunday, buy, 8 albums or cassettes, or back in the day it was 8 tracks. 8 albums or 8 tracks for a penny, and only have to buy one more at full price, And the RCA Record Club had the variation where it looks like Paul Stanley has teardrops coming out of his eye.
Yep. And he's got 2 blue teardrops coming out of his left or right, and people were kind of I think so. I may be flipped on that. Either way, but they discussed that later on, and apparently that was just part of a pressing error.
It was just it was just an error in when they printed it. I looked for this for years.
Yeah.
I looked for this for years.
I always ask people about this anytime they have a cover of it. It's like, which one do you have?
I looked for it. You know what? I saw one a week ago at a big record convention thing, and and I was like tempted to buy it. But anyway, I had it. I was on the prowl for it for years, and about 3 years ago, I'm having to move all my records. And I've got like 6 copies of Rock and Roll Over, because anytime I find it like with the sticker or anything,
yeah, because the sticker's hard to find.
And yeah, we should also note it came with a sticker, and it came with an order form, and what else? There's something else that it come with.
I think that was it, because it didn't have like lyrics or a fold out or anything.
The sticker was die cut. You could pull off the individual members as its own sticker or the logos. It was kind of puzzled cut.
Yeah.
So to find those are hard.
Oh, the inner sleeve had the 4 Kiss logos squished together. That's what it was.
Yeah, it had the inner sleeve. And then, of course, this RCA misprint with the teardrop cover.
Yeah. I'm very happy to have a copy of that one.
I moved these records around. I've moved a bunch, particularly in the last 15 years. I've moved a bunch, and I've had to move my records every time. It's always a big, giant pain in the ass.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going through my records, and I'm like, wait a minute. I've got one.
How did this get here?
How did this get here? I never noticed it.
Little gift to yourself.
Yeah, I was looking for it, and then I had it all this time. I think the guy was asking like $50 for it when I saw the thing the other day. I'm like, why? People don't make any sense to me.
Would this be the most parodied Kiss album cover? Maybe this or Destroyer?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I would agree. And Dynasty too, because of how simple it is.
This cover is very iconic. I think they got a lot of mileage off of this because it was so readily, it seems like it was ready made for a T-shirt or.
Oh yeah, I think the T-shirts that look the best are the yellow shirts with the graphic on it. Yeah. I think that looks so good.
It's a great image. I think it's probably their best cover. I really do. It's such an unusual and eye-grabbing cover, and it works to their image so very well.
They tried to reuse the same aesthetic for, what was it, Sonic Boom or Monster, one of the Walmart CDs they put out.
Sonic Boom.
I think we might have forgotten to mention over the course of the summer during the Destroyer tour, Casablanca repackaged the first 3 records in a single set called the Originals.
Yeah,
and that was that had a kind of a reproduction of the original album, the first album photo, but it's
fired up.
It's put in the image of a nuclear bomb exploding. And then you open the record up, and the records are in paper sleeves that reproduce the covers of each one. It's Kiss, Hotter Than Hell, and Dressed to Kill, and also came with a little booklet that had a history of Kiss up to that point. That whopping 2-year history that they had.
But it's crazy that they could fill up a book just in over 2 years.
Yeah, and there was a lot of cool little information. It also came with a sheet of punch out trading cards. You could punch it out off the sheet.
Yeah,
they were perforated. And then a large Kiss Army sticker.
Yep.
And finding this is very hard, to find a loaded copy of the originals. Those are not, I find the originals fairly frequently, but they're almost in varying states of disorder. They're missing records.
Yeah,
my copy, always missing the inserts. I don't think I've ever seen one that had the cards in it.
No, I don't have the cards. I've got one. It's got the booklet, but it's basically falling apart, and it's missing one of the records. I think it's either missing Higher Than Hell or the first record.
Well, I haven't seen one with the cards in it, except for the one that I own.
Oh.
I'm sure John 5 has one, too.
Yeah. You know what? That guy,
I watched his fucking collection video the other day. It's nuts.
It's sick. That guy, you know what? That guy has got everyone beat.
Oh yeah,
by miles. We have to
he's
bow
a prime
to the
example.
master.
And he's a prime example of I couldn't give a good damn about his band or the sound he makes, but I love the fact he's such a Kiss nerd.
Oh yeah,
I love it.
Yeah. Quirky Stasiak makes this great comment about Rock and Roll Over after the fact, or or great depending, interesting, I should say. This comment in and of itself, we could probably do a whole episode on. He said, Rock and Roll Over was a great record, but it was not Destroyer.
Yeah? I wonder what he exactly meant by that.
Destroyer, they really went over and above what they could do. They learned a lot with it. They were making really, I hate to use the word because it's pretentious, but they really made kind of a piece of art with Destroyer. I mean, it went to another level, and that's again the Bob Ezrin. And it would be interesting to say at this point, had they continued with Bob Ezrin, what trajectory their career would have taken. Because it wasn't like, for all of the Bob Ezrinisms, the over the top, everything in the kitchen sink, the records he made were still very accessible. They weren't like art rock records or something.
Right. It wasn't Yes or Pink Floyd. Although he did work with Pink Floyd on the Wall later on.
And it wasn't even as weird as some of the Cooper stuff.
No.
But even the Cooper stuff was very accessible.
I could see that.
And so it would have been interesting to see if they would have, I wonder if they would have garnered any sort of kind of critical accolades after a point. I would say probably not. I think most people were still judging them by listening with their eyes instead of their ears.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think they were missing the...
Well, this album also had a bunch of Fuck Me, Suck Me songs like Bob wanted to get rid of on Destroyer too.
They were like, oh yeah, well that's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
They hired...
We're a Fuck Me, Suck Me band.
They hired Danny Goldberg as their publicist, who had previously worked for Led Zeppelin when Led Zeppelin had a very... difficult time with the press, had an adversarial reputation with the press, and Goldberg became their kind of magic bridge to that. And so it made sense that Kiss would do the same thing. I think actually Danny Goldberg ran Swan Song Records for a second.
Interesting.
But it's interesting they brought him along. He, I guess in conjunction with their... well, we'll get to this. So they very important thing about the whole Rock and Roll Over. I keep hitting my mic. The whole Rock and Roll Over, era is going to happen the following spring. But they're going on tour again. This is basically an extension of the Destroyer tour.
Yeah,
it begins in Savannah, Georgia. They're using the same stage, the same costumes. Some interesting things happen along the way, the most notable being on December 12th in Lakeland, Florida. Ace Frehley grabs an ungrounded handrail and electrocutes himself.
It was like heart stopped for like a couple minutes and then kicked him back in.
I don't know that his heart stopped, but he was jolted pretty good. They took him off, and he kind of took him a few minutes to kind of recombobulate. He finished the show. Yeah.
He said he didn't have any feeling in his fingers, but he finished the show.
He finished the show. Well, it's that shows a lot of heart, but, he obviously couldn't have been hurt that bad if anyone felt he was in shape to finish the show.
Yeah. And also, it's Ace. By this point, he was abusing his body pretty well. That may have just been, who knows, maybe that electric shock kept him from dying so long.
Right.
Well, they had this magical miracle drug that really served to help people in moments of crisis, that helped them overcome things. It was called cocaine.
I thought you were about to say cortisone, but
no.
That would be Peter later on.
On February 10th, the AMA Music Awards air, and they win for Best Single for Beth.
Yeah.
Lydia, his wife, accepts the award.
Yeah.
And then they show like a live clip or something of them thanking everyone.
And they're acting surprised. We won. Oh, wow.
Well, they recorded it several weeks prior. They knew that they had already won.
Yeah.
But I'm not exactly sure how all that works, but I think it's kind of ironic that Lydia accepts it. And the song's somewhat kind of a critical of a
female,
a
when the
nagging
music
female, and she's like, "This is how everyone feels when their man's away." I'm like, okay, but hey, kudos to Lydia Chris. That gave her moment.
Oh, totally.
And then on February 18th, another very important milestone in history. they play their first Madison Square Garden headlining
that
gig.
meant a lot to Paul.
Well, it meant a lot to all of them.
Yeah. Well, he's just been the most vocal about it. That's why I was calling that.
Well, Peter was pretty vocal about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a big deal. There's a video that exists of it, professionally shot. Mm-hmm. It's pretty rough and ragged, but it's exciting and it's
rock and roll.
It's great, yeah. And that's interesting because it's 1977 at this point, early winter of 77. So 3 years prior, we're talking about a band that couldn't give away tickets probably. I mean, they were they're fresh out of the chute, and it's only taken them
too, yeah.
And in 3 years they've gone from playing a place like the Hotel Diplomat or the Daisy or the Coventry, and now they're literally playing Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
So their rise has been pretty meteoric.
That had to have been like the peak moment for all 4 of the members at that point, after all the shit they went through, after all the records, and after all it took to get where they are, like to headline Madison Square Garden for how many nights at this point?
Well, this was only one.
Just the one, okay.
And it was a hard sell for the it seemed like they had to kind of lean on the area promoter, which would have been Ron Dessler. There's a famous picture of them presenting him with an award. There's footage of it too. There's movie footage of it. But he was continuously surprised by their, they were always one-upping themselves with stuff like that. So I don't have the last date of the tour.
I actually had that pulled up. I'm going to get that back up here.
But I'm pretty sure it was in Massachusetts.
They talk about how when they after that first Madison Square Garden headlining show, everything else was just kind of like downhill for the rest of the tour. Like they immediately played.
Well, there's no.
All right, so real quick before we go into that one, your first comment. The last U.S. date was in Hampton on March 7th.
Hampton, Virginia?
It's not saying, and yes, it is.
That's
yes.
interesting.
And then on March 24th and 25th is when they run out to Osaka.
Yeah, I was gonna say, now this is one of the big things that's important off this rock and roll over era is their first tour to Japan, and they worked out this really great deal with Pan American Airlines to charter a plane, and the plane, and they used this as basically probably the biggest press junket of all time. They invite certain members of the press to fly with the band in this private jet to Japan for their first ever Japanese tour.
Yeah.
In the process, Al Ross, who works for AMI, which is their booking agency, has made this deal with Pan American to paint the plane with the KISS logo on it. That logo stayed on that plane for years after. He said for years after he'd get pictures of that plane at different parts in the world.
That's so cool.
People would take pictures of it. So it kind of worked to their benefit.
Yeah.
What is also interesting about this tour, not only do they fly over a great deal of press people, because this is going to end up working really well for them, and this will inform a lot of what they kick off Love Gun with. But this is also the first time they ever use what is now commonly known as the Love Gun stage.
Yes.
Because they've been using the quote-unquote Destroyer stage all the way through this touring cycle for Rock and Roll Over.
And I heard it was something like they couldn't get the Destroyer stuff over.
I don't think that's it. I think they've designed and constructed this new stage, and they couldn't get it to. They couldn't figure out, it was too heavy. They had to figure out, okay, they've got it loaded. It's going to fly over.
A lot of shit on it,
but it's just too heavy, and they're like trying to figure out, how are we going to get around this? Because everything's locked. We're ready to go. And apparently one of the guys that are flying the plane stops and goes, you know what? I know how we can make this work. We can fly the plane depressurized. And they basically had to wear astronaut suits.
Oh, wow.
Or the same kind of suits that jet flyers fly when they go up into the upper atmosphere.
Yeah.
So they had to wear like gravity suits or whatever and fly. And now that's one thing to do that for an hour or two in a plane or whatever.
Going to Japan.
But you're flying essentially, 14 hours from, I assume, New York to Japan.
Yeah.
And that took
tough.
a high level of commitment on the people that are doing this.
Oh, totally.
So they get
Hope they got a raise.
and it worked. They get to Japan, and of course the reception they get there is like Beatlemania. We've all seen the footage of the Beatles landing for the first time in '64.
And it's like deafening
and it's
audio.
just like the crowds are all lined up in the airport, and it's just like they're met with thousands of screaming teenagers. Well, Kiss meets the same thing here in Japan, and they have worked out in advance that they're going to playing in full regalia. They're going to come out as Kiss, costumes and all, right?
Yep.
And they've got this worked out with customs. Everything's good to go. They get suited up, as they're approaching. They come off the plane. The place erupts. Kiss has arrived, but there's been a shift change. And the guys that made the arrangement for them to kind of just come on through customs were like, no. No.
Yeah.
You're going to have to take all this stuff off. How do we know that you are the people that are on this passport photo?
Yeah.
So they had to go to a room, take their makeup off.
Which is already
and show that they are who they are.
Yeah.
And then redo everything so they can come back out again.
I would be
it was a
cussing the
complete
entire time.
clusterfuck.
And it's like, and at that time, it took them an hour to put on their makeup and do it right and all that shit too.
Oh yeah, I mean it still takes them a while.
I'm sure they probably did it
within about 15 minutes.
Time.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so that's how Kiss got. That was their first "Hello Japan," but that shows the level of commitment that this band had to take.
Yes,
and this is something they had to do. We laugh about this, but really, that's what they had to do to prepare for every single show, every single day, every single press junket, every single interview, every single everything. Anytime there was a camera involved, they had to be in character. They had to be in costume. And at the same time, they're still fighting on the regular, probably more so now as they're attracting greater interest, to hide their faces because they don't want anyone to see, they're preserving that. People forgotten. No one knew what they looked like. And they didn't want anyone to know what they looked like. They were creating that mystique. So they go and they play, how many, I don't know how many dates. It wasn't many. It was like, they were only there for like a week or two. And it capped off with multiple shows, 3 nights at the Budokan in Japan.
Japan in that time period in the late 70s really embraced, the new rock that was coming out too.
Oh yeah, they were loving it. They were loving it.
And they did 3 days at Budokan, April 1st, 2nd, and 4th.
And one of those dates, they had to tear their stage down so they could do like some other event at the arena that day.
That was probably the 3rd.
And then set it all back up again.
Yeah. God.
They played 2 nights. They played 2 shows in one day there. So they was it 3 days? You said
yes.
So
April 1st,
did,
2nd, 4th.
They did 4 shows. The shows were professionally videotaped for broadcast in Japan, and later I guess they were used for HBO. It was an HBO concert special. HBO was a new thing then, so most people probably never even got to see it because cable had yet to really ascend like it had.
Right.
So that had to have been really special for any kid that had HBO in 1977 or 8, whenever it finally aired.
And wasn't the, at least another one of the lore stories is Gene, Paul, Bill, someone in the Kiss camp read over the contract and penciled in saying after so many broadcasts, the rights go back to Acoin Management.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, that's a good story, but that's probably apocryphal. I'm sure all that stuff was probably very carefully covered, but you never know. I mean, they recorded those shows too. So Eddie Cramer was on hand to record all these shows. Those recordings exist. In fact, some of it survived to be on Alive 2. I don't know that it was intended to be a second live album. It was intended to be a live album for Japan, is the way I understand it. Much like Cheap Trick's at Budokan record was essentially just intended only for the Japanese market.
Right.
So, that's somewhat of a question mark. It's like, okay, that was all recorded.
You can find really good boots of it out there called The Lost Alive too.
Yeah, but my question is then, as much as Alive had been doctored, how much doctoring was done to this? And there's never been any information about that. I mean, obviously they had to have gone in and done something, I think, to clean it up. I mean, if they've taken the time to professionally record it, somewhere there had to have been some additional work, because they did that. We'll discuss this in future episodes when they go to Australia.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's a way to really cap off a giant amount of stuff for an era that, again, seems to largely have been overlooked.
Absolutely. No, that's one thing I noticed. Like, anytime I've been looking up these previous albums, it's like I can find treasure troves of information and notes and different interviews from people. Coming up very empty for Rock and Roll Over.
Yeah, that's but they got a lot of press off of it at the time.
Not really any hits off of it, though, except maybe Hard Luck Woman.
Hard Luck Woman did pretty well. You know, probably, again, the idea was to create confusion on the part of the listener. Is that a new Rod Stewart song? Oh, no, it's Kiss. Well, I kind of like that, you know.
He brought up Dr. Love. I know that's become like a radio staple and used in commercials and things like that, too. Was that like a hit when it came out, too?
I don't think so. I don't think it was.
It felt like it was constantly part of the set after that.
Yeah,
because they played it in Dynasty.
It became a staple of their live set.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I count as a hit. If they kind of keep it in the live set.
Interesting, because Hard Luck Woman never did.
Nope.
Apparently, they played that like they it is believed they played that on the first couple of shows of the Rock and Roll Over tour. Mm-hmm. By the time it gets recorded for Alive 2, that was done completely.
In the
not
studio.
Live.
Yeah, and there was like a sound checker in the studio or something
like that. So really, that song was never really played live, to the best of anyone's knowledge.
I think same thing with Tomorrow and Tonight.
Yeah, but you know, we'll get all to that on the next episode of No Time to Turn, and hopefully you guys will come along with us, and we'll hopefully see all of you again next time on No Time to Turn. So for Cap Nunn and Alex Stiff, I'm Russ Ward, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you for listening. Please insert another coin by supporting the show for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/somethinggoodnetwork.